I wonder if you addressed maybe like public homosociality amongst Koreans and how acceptance for that has kind of given Koreans a space for
Yeah.
more kind of living a public, a social homosexual identity, or yeah, has that changed? Has that uh, tolerance for public homosociality kind of diminished
Yeah, I think
along with
that's a
this?
really, yeah, I think that's a really important question too, because the thing about Korea is, I mean, I use the term heteronormative familism, right?
Right.
So where the idea of heteronormativity is very much based on the norms of family, right? But I mean, but the two things that really distinguish, I guess, Korea and Asian countries, East Asian countries in particular, are two things. Like number one, the family-based societies, and number two, they're very gendered, patriarchal societies, right? And so in the introduction, I talk about the kind of hyper-masculinity that is produced within South Korea as a result of its military history, right? So, you know, especially after, I guess, the Korean War, the nation is divided, right? The military is the most, you know, it's the most powerful and organized institution in the country. You know, later on, universal conscription, right, for Korean men for 2.5 years gets introduced, right? So it's a very hyper masculine and hyper feminine society, right? So that's, and then there's a very strong idea of familism, right? There's a Confucian notion of family as the, you know, main institution within society, main social institution. But then that idea of familism becomes further strengthened, you know, through the Confucian familism of the military dictator, right? He uses the idea of family to suppress political and, you know, dissent during economic takeoff, right? So what happens is, but the thing is, the ironic thing is, the kind of hyper-masculinity and hyper-femininity and the kind of gendering of you know, of social roles and spaces, paradoxically creates a lot of room for homoeroticism, right? So Korea is a society where you have very strong heterosexual roles, but at the same time, where friendship between the sexes, right, males with other males, is privileged over heterosexual romance, right? And so paradoxically, the reason that you are seeing, I mean, my second chapter is the growth of gay bathhouses in Seoul, right? And the internet, the chapter that you read, it's about hookups. The reason that you see so much emphasis on sex is partly because it's such a heavily homosocial society. There's so many opportunities, right, within gay saunas, within schools, or within, you know, workplaces for men to have sex with other men. And so, paradoxically, so on one hand, because it's such a patriarchal society, there's more opportunities for homoeroticism, but it's not recognized as homosexuality. Rather, it's recognized as friendship between men, right? So if you go to any like neighborhood in Seoul and you see guys, you know, after they've been drinking at night, 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, and they're going around kissing each other or with their arms on each other's shoulders, yeah, most Koreans would not bat an eye. They would say, you know what? Oh, that's natural. That's how younger brothers and older brothers who are friends would act towards each other, right? And so that has created many opportunities for gay men to be free, right? To engage in these homoerotic relationships without ever having to define them as homosexual or heterosexual. But then, because of the kind of modern discourses of homosexuality that are being introduced in Korea, right, through the gay and lesbian movement, right, and through the media, what you now see is the policing of those homoerotic relationships. So now, men are much more careful with other men. I mean, it's still homosocial and homoerotic relationship, but they're much more careful. And I think the same thing that has happened in the U.S., right? through the introduction of these sexual categories, right, men have much less freedom to be friends with other men. You see what I mean? And so heterosexual relationships really gets more emphasized than homosexual relationships now, creating less freedom.